Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices, and you can sign up for product alerts. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we're going to be running for an election. We've got 3 months of campaigning to do, and we're trying to win the election in the end by going through different months and then having a couple of debates. Today, we're talking about Campaign Trail. This is for 1 to 6 players. It's originally published by Cosmic Wombat Games. So let me show you how it's played, and I'll see you on the other side. At the beginning of the game, each player is going to get 2 candidate cards that look like this, and they get to select which one they want. They're double-sided, and each of them gives a starting money, some registered voters, and some special abilities that they'll use throughout the game. Here we have a 3-player game set up. So we have the Republicans, which are red, the Democrats, which are blue, and the Libertarians, which are yellow. And it gets seeded depending on how many players are playing, how it gets set up with the cubes in which state. And each player gets to select their starting state based upon some cards in their hand, like the president gets to start, for example, in Alabama, that's their home state, and things like that. So over the course of the game, it's sort of an area control game where you're trying to have the most voters voting for you, by these cubes in the states, and each of the states are going to give a certain amount of electoral college votes. For example, here, Texas gives 38. Now, one of the cool things here is the real-time scoreboard of the Electoral College. Here's the 3 different players that are playing, and it shows you how big a state is how many Electoral College votes they have. And you can see in real time who's winning. For example, if the red player took over Pennsylvania, for example, you would simply move it to the end of here and slide this down so you can always see who has the most Electoral College votes and who's winning. Trying to have the most at the end of the game. Now this game can be played between 1 and 6 players. There's a solo variant, 2 players, each player selects one of the 3 parties. In a 3-player game, there's 1 on each. In a 4-player game, you use just any 2 of them, but there's teams. And in a 6-player game, it's also 2 for each. And a 5-player game, 1 player will be by themselves, but they'll get to go twice. So really flexible in the player count here. Not usually fun in these campaign games. Usually they're 2-player only. Now the game is played over the last 3 months of an election. There's a stack of cards here for August, then there'll be a debate. This is different every game. What's the debate issues in the first debate, and where it is different every game. This is Seattle, and these issues are going to be debated about. Then you go through a whole nother round of playing cards, and essentially it's September. Then you'll have another debate, again, different every game. In Baltimore, different every game. And then a last round of cards that you'll play. So you basically go through 3 long rounds of playing cards and manipulating the board, and in between those 2 you have these debates. That's the flow of the game. Now on your turn, you're simply going to play one of the many cards you have in your hand, and you're going to select one of the 4 actions that's on that card. Now in the game, there's actually 6 possible actions, but each card only has 4 of those 6, and they're divvied up differently. So you have a hand of cards, and you're trying to figure out which action to take. If you played this card, you take one of these 4 actions. For example, this one's campaign. This player, if they're in one of these states, Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama, and it shows them here as well, and they are, let's say the red player's here, they're in their home state of Alabama. Whenever you campaign, you can pay up to 60 million and money of these nice cards in this game. Each candidate starts with a certain amount depending on their special abilities, the card that they got at the beginning of the game. And they can place up to 6 voters as they see fit in any of these 3 states. So let's say this player, now anytime you place a cube, it's 1, but anytime you place a cylinder, it's 3. So let's say they played 60 million, they want to put all 6 here. So now they're winning Florida 6-2, and they're going to take it from the yellow Libertarian player. So again, you'd take this Florida from the yellow player, and you'd update it like this, so now red's in the lead for now. And you'd then draw a card from this deck. It'd be the next player's turn. Now let's say the next player's turn, Libertarian, they play this card. Another thing you can do is advertise. Now when you advertise, it will have certain types of issues here. These are the issues that have to do with some of the debates. And they are also tied to certain states. For each of these issues, you can pay 20 million and essentially put 1 cube or 1 registered voter into each of the states that have that. So it actually shows you where these states are. They're color-coded with this action here, advertise. Now you don't have to be in any of these states. You can be anywhere on the map, which gives you some more freedom, but you're more sort of spread out. So you could pay 20 million for each of these and put 1 registered voter in each of these states. Or if you selected just one of these, you'd only put it in each state that has that icon. Now, everyone starts with a certain amount of registered voters that they actually can put out, and we'll show you how to add to that later, because if you're out of voters that are registered, you have to get them registered. And when you pay the 20 million, you have to put one registered voter in each of the states. You don't pick and choose. You have to do all of them for that issue. And let's say it's the next player's turn. The third sort of action that you can take to add or subtract cubes from the board is what they call politics. Some of the cards have these, and some of them are instant, like this one has a lightning bolt. Take 3 voters from undecided, which means they're from the general supply. They're not yet registered for you to use, and you can place them in any combination into these states. So these are basically like special actions that you play. Some of them are instant, like this. Other of ones stay in front of you, and they give you sort of an ability for the rest of the game, like gain 10 million and 1 registered voter each time any opponent takes a travel action. Or sometimes there'll be sort of reactions where play immediately after an opponent declares a campaign action, they must now pay 20 million per voter placed instead of the 60 million. So that's, things like that. Now again, anytime you play a card, you're only using it once and then you're discarding it. But just on this card here, this shows you some of the other actions that you could possibly take. T is travel. This allows you to travel up to a certain amount of states. So let's say this president was here and they go 4. They could go up to 4 states. So they could go, 1, 2, and then they could keep going, or they could stop and go up to 4 states. This helps them move around. And as you know, that's important because some of the actions and such are going to have to do with what region you're in for campaigning and things like that. Also, funding is simply you just take this much money, because again, you're going to need to spend money to get voters out there, so that just essentially gets you money. And the last possible action that you could take is registering voters. This allows you to take this many voters, 9 in this case, from the general supply and add it in front of you as your registered voters. Because remember, you can only place registered voters when you're doing those things. So there's sort of like 3 actions that help you sort of do things like advertising, campaign, and politicking to get things out. And 3 sort of planning actions, getting more money, getting more voters, and traveling around. And speaking of traveling, I have to tell you that some cities on the map will actually have a plane, and you can fly to any of those cities regardless of where you are when you play something like this. Some of them are like, hey, you can travel 5, or you can go to a city with a plane, things like that. As you can see, there's a plane right there. Now the first month continues like that until the last card is drawn from the deck. Then each player will make sure they've had an equal number of turns. Then you're going to go to the debate where all players will move their character, their meeple, to this city, in this case Seattle. Then you're going to have a debate about social and human rights and national security. Now, speaking of all these different issues, each player also gets one of these awesome party reference books. It actually talks about all of the different actions you can take, what they do. It actually shows you all of the states and their tiebreakers and things like that, all the issues are in each state. It actually talks about each issue specifically, what it is, and what states you'll find those issues when you're doing advertising and things like that. So this is a very useful guide when you're going into the debates. So we have the debate set up here. Each of these sort of tokens matches the 6 items on this specific debate. And you also reset turn order. Whoever's in the lead has to go first, and whoever's in the last place goes last, because it's advantageous to go last in the debate. And in this, each player is going to play a card, and you have 3 rounds of playing cards trying to win different issues. So let's say it was the red player's turn. Now, they're going to play one of the cards that's in their hand. Now, I haven't shown you this yet, but each card has some debate issues up here. And so each of the debate tokens that are on this card are going to move 1 towards that player. Let's say this was the red player. So it's going to move all 3 of the issues shown on the icon on this card up 1, just like that. Now, this is interesting because during the game, you're playing cards for certain things, but you're possibly trying to hold some of these cards back to win the debates. But let's say the yellow player plays this. Now it's going to take this issue back, so it goes back to the center. It's going to move this issue here 2, because there's 2 of them, and it's going to move this issue 1 towards them. Now let's say it's the blue player's turn. You have to play at least 1 issue that's on the debate track, or you must pass. But if it has at least 1 like this, it has a defense. They would move it back here because there's 1 of those. Now there's 2 icons that are there that aren't even on this. This is a clever mechanism called rabbit trail. We have 2 of these parachutes. So what happens is it brings it in from outside and moves it 2 down this player. So it would actually be down the 2 down here. And that allows that to move that. And this one actually comes out and goes like this. So as long as there's 1 of these, the rabbit trail opens up new things to talk about, giving other players more things to possibly play cards. So it's good because it allows you to sort of sneak attack some things in there, but it gives the opponents more ways to play their card and different cards they might want to play. It's a really interesting part of the debates. Now once you've gone through 3 rounds of every player either playing a card or passing, you look at each of these issues, and this player is going to be able to put this many voters, and it comes from the unregistered supply, onto every state that has one of these. And this is when this comes in really handy because this is like foreign aid, and it tells you how, which states that it goes to. So you quickly say, okay, blue's putting 2 of their cubes into all of these states. And you do that for everything that everyone has done in the debates. Then you'd simply go through a whole nother round, you'd have another debate, everyone would go to Baltimore, and you'd have another round, and the game would end. Now the game has a very clever tying mechanism. In each state, if it's tied, you look at the star on the left. If that's one of the tied players, that player is winning this state. So right now, red is winning this state. Obviously, if blue puts 1 more, they'd be winning. However, if it looked like this, there is no red, so you go to the second tiebreaker, which is over here, and blue wins this state. It's a very clever way to handle ties in this game, which happens quite often. That's the whole game. Whoever has the most electoral college's votes at the end is the winner. Now there is a whole new module called Dirty Politics. It's cards that you add to the game, and essentially they're more take that actions, and each of the main actions that's there are similar, but they do something slightly different. It adds essentially more mechanisms to the game and more take that to the game, but it also makes the game a lot longer. Also, you can play a solo or a cooperative version as well. All right, first of all, let's talk about what I like about the game. First of all, great production. Has very thick components, the art looks really nice, that score track is awesome how it goes together, and the different states you put where whoever's winning those, it shows you the score right away, the linen cards. Now, I do realize that this game had quite a bit of delay on Kickstarter, but when they finally did fulfill it, it really did meet expectations or even exceed them. Because again, the components here are top notch in this game. This is a heavy game, like physically, in pounds. Like this game's heavy. It's got a lot of stuff in there. I always love multi-use cards in games, and it works really well here because there's 8. There's 6. Total actions that you can take, but only 4 of those 6 are on the cards, and I like that. And you're looking at your hand and you're being like, oh man, I gotta do this, but then this, and you're kind of trying to plan a couple turns in advance, but I love that you have multiple choices, and sometimes they're really tough choices, like, oh, I don't want to give away this card, it gives me the most money, 120, money, but it also goes to states that I really want. So, and you're trying to figure out, you've got a plan, you got to look at your multi-use cards to figure out which ones you're going to use for each of the cards, because you can only use each card for one thing. So multi-use cards work great here. I like how there's sort of 3 setup actions, like gaining money, gaining voters, and moving around, and then 3 sort of placement actions, where there's campaigning, advertising, and then those special abilities. It keeps the game, quite even with the decisions, and some setup and some planning with some actual tactical putting things out on the board. I like that. This is definitely an area control tug of war for sure. It is. It's a knife fight, and you're fighting over the biggest states, and you're trying to sneak into other ones. And again, it's a card game though, so you're only able to do basically what your cards say, but with the cards you're given, what are you able to do in order to get that done? And then you have the debates, which also is a really cool part of this game. You're holding back, much like the Making of the President 1960, the 2-player game, the JFK versus Nixon game. In this game, the debate is so different from the rest of the game, but I love how you're holding back cards. So again, you have these multi-use cards, and you might be wanting to use them for actions, but then you also might be wanting to hold things back to win certain states, multiple states of a certain issue in the debate. And then when you get to the debate, it's very interesting, because it's like you've got to be able to play one that has at least 1 icon, but you could add other things that you want to double down on. And that's good because you kind of surprise the opponents, and you can kind of take a lead in types of states they didn't realize were going to be part of the debate. But you're also opening up for them because you don't know what cards they have in their hands. That's such a clever thing where you can hold back a certain amount of, like, let's say you're trying to win Texas and they have the little, the gun laws, and you hold back 3 cards that have that, and you have at least 1 icon on there. You could surprise people with a bunch of those and try to take over that big state. I think that's really cool. Those rabbit hole things, it's also thematic as well. The game is tense throughout, and typically it comes right down to the wire. Usually you don't really know who's going to be winning to the last round. I love that, the 2-player game has 3 different variants, because you could play red versus blue, blue versus yellow, or red versus yellow, and the setup is completely different between those. So even if you're playing a 2-player game, 3 different completely ways different ways to set up the game, and you have different options there. Not to mention all the options from the different candidates that you'll get each game, so a lot of replayability here. This is a multiplayer campaign game, which typically does not happen. Most of these types of games are strict two-player, like 1960 Making of the President, which is a fantastic game. And this is like the first that I've played that has multiplayers. And it really changes the dynamics. It's not just you versus someone else. You've got to watch what everybody's doing. That's one of the strongest aspects of this game, finally being able to play a great game of this style with more than just two players. The team-based play, sure. I mean, I like the game best at 2 or 3, but with 4 and more, you've got the team-based play, and it works well too, where you sit next to your teammate, and you're both going to get turns before the next player, and one's the president, one's the vice president. One will debate the first time, the vice president, then the president will debate the second time. You both have different home states. If you're in the same area, you can trade cards with each other. So if you are playing it, it is fun to play the team-based game. I prefer the other one, but the fact that you could play this game up to 6 players is pretty cool. So overall, I really love this game. Anything negative? Well, there were these extra sort of advanced game cards called Dirty Politics, and it feels like these were sort of like a Kickstarter, like a stretch goal, and these cards added more cards to the deck, which means it made the game too long. The game's long enough anyways, it's about 2 hours, but when you add those cards, the game gets longer, and each of the actions work slightly differently, so you have to learn like 8 new ways to play the game that you already kind of know. Sure, it gives the game more depth, but there's a lot more take that, and it makes the game just too long. I didn't remove those. I tried to sort of mix in some to keep the card count the same, to keep it so it didn't stay, the game didn't go too long, but then you're changing the balance of the cards that are in the game, and that didn't work well either. So I didn't like those, but I don't play with them, and the game's still amazing. So that's one of the negatives there. The setup time. This game does take a while to set up. You're just putting all the cubes in all the states are the right ones. You're putting all the states in that score track. It does take a while to set up, but it is a longer game, so I'm more forgiving for that. If the game's going to be longer, if the setup's a little bit longer than I typically like. The last round can definitely have some analysis paralysis, where it's your last play. You're looking at all your cards. You're trying to figure out, what can I do to try to win this? And it can grind to a screeching halt, but after playing a 2-hour game, you're kind of going to want to make sure your last turn is your best one there to try to make a win. But that can't happen. The last turn can take a little bit of time. Also, the end game is sort of, even though it always just sort of goes down to the wire, the end game, since there's no sort of ending, you just end at the end of the 3rd round, it was like an anticlimactic ending. I actually tried using, I put on Board Game Geek, and I tried using an ending similar to 1960 to Making the President, where you hold back some cards, and the starting states on those cards, you can add 2 cube per states. And that actually added a very exciting ending to this, where you hold back cards you're not sure if you're going to win. And those states are never the most powerful ones, so you're winning like the secondary ones, which definitely can make things change. So I like the end game by itself was not as exciting, but the little variant that I put together in Board Game Geek seems to work really well. I don't typically do things like that, but I love this game so much, and since it was used in a previous game that worked really well, it works well here as well. But with all this being said, all those negatives I believe are being looked at and possibly redeveloped, because Gray Fox Games is going to be bringing this game to Kickstarter again and reprinting it, hopefully in 2020. Sounds like it's going to be that. I'm hopeful. Nothing's official yet. But they're going to be bringing this game back and reprinting it, and they're going to be offering the expansions that are being worked on. And I heard that they're also going to be working on some of the problems or issues that I've talked about here. They're working on the ending with the original designers and things like that. So when this comes back on Kickstarter, look at all the things they've done. They've probably addressed a lot of the negative things I had to say, but this game is fantastic. It is definitely the best campaign game with multiplayers, of course, because it's the only one, but it is amazing. It's one of my favorite games of the year. If you like that area control style game, you're able to play a game that has to do with elections with keeping politics out of it. And because of that, it's getting a saxophone serenade, because I'm going to be keeping this game in my gaming library, which means I got to get rid of one. So it's a tough choice to do this. And for that, we're going to give it a saxophone serenade. Let's hit it. Did you miss the Game Topper 2.0 Kickstarter? Have no fear, it's not too late to get in on the ultimate gaming accessory. Convert your table into a high-quality gaming table with a fully portable Game Topper system and take advantage of some of the best 3mm premium gaming mats in the industry. New styles, new sizes, and new accessories can be yours. Upgrade every game you play by late backing now at GameToppersLLC.com.